Success looks beautiful from the outside. People see the white coat, the confident smile, the awards, and they assume you've conquered life. But behind every polished smile lies a story most wouldn't believe. Mine began long before I became Dr. Elena Vasquez, neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Every morning, as I walk through the gleaming corridors of the hospital, I'm reminded of the weight I carry, the lives of children depending on my hands. I specialize in pediatric brain surgeries, the kind where a millimeter can mean the difference between a life saved and a life lost. Parents look at me like I'm a miracle worker, and sometimes I almost believe IT.AT38. I've built what most would call a dream life. My mansion in Guildford is massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a private garden. My Mercedes hums like a promise of control and success. My designer handbags, my vacations in Vail, all symbols of achievement. On paper, I've won the game of life, but behind the glossy perfection lies a truth I rarely allow myself to face. My father, Marcus Vasquez, is 70 now. A retired grocer who lives alone in a small one-bedroom apartment in Highland Town. His rent is less than what I spend on a single dinner. He drives an ancient Toyota Camry that coughs every time he starts it. And still, whenever I call, rarely these days, he answers with warmth in his voice, as if I'm still his little girl balancing homework on the counter of his corner store. That store was his life. Vasquez Corner Market. Open since 1958. I grew up there, surrounded by the hum of refrigerators and the scent of fresh bread. I used to complain about helping after school, but now I realize those years shaped me. My father taught me discipline, patience, and the value of hard work. He never said much, but his actions spoke louder than words. Back in 2018, as I was finishing my residency at Yale, I faced a crisis. My final year tuition bill was staggering, $65,000, plus living expenses and material costs. Scholarships had run dry. I remember calling my father, trying to sound calm while my voice trembled. "Dad, I don't know how I'm going to manage this." He didn't hesitate. "Don't worry, Mija. I'll take care of it." A week later, he sold the store. I didn't understand the depth of that decision then. I thanked him quickly, promising I'd pay him back once I became established. I never truly grasped that he'd sold his life's work, his identity, just so I could chase mine. 5 years passed. My income soared, my name began to appear in medical journals, and invitations to galas and conferences filled my calendar. But I never repaid him, not because I forgot, but because I convinced myself he didn't need it. I told myself he was proud just to see me succeed. I was wrong. What I didn't know was that my father had continued sacrificing quietly behind the scenes. For 4 years, he had been the anonymous donor funding the Pediatric Neurosurgery Excellence Award, the very award I had received every year at Johns Hopkins. That award had elevated my career, opened doors, secured grants, and built my public image as a compassionate doctor devoted to children. I had no idea that it was his doing. He had donated over $2.5 million, money he had painstakingly saved from the store, investments, and what little he earned afterward. He did it all without telling me. To him, it was love. To me, unknowingly, it became pride. Our relationship had grown strained over the years. I rarely visited. When I did, I often felt out of place in his small apartment, surrounded by old photographs and worn furniture. The last time we spoke before everything changed, he had called with excitement in his voice. "Elena, I was thinking of throwing you a birthday party here this year. Just a few friends, some cake, like old times." I sighed, impatient. "Dad, that would ruin my image. You can't invite people to that place." You don't understand the kind of crowd I move in now. Silence. Then a quiet, I see. I hung up, not realizing that those words would echo in my heart for years. 3 days later, I stood beneath the grand chandeliers of the Johns Hopkins Annual Gala, preparing to receive my 5th consecutive Excellence Award. 450 of the state's most prestigious physicians were present. Cameras flashed. The MC's voice boomed through the hall, praising my dedication, brilliance, and humanitarian spirit. I smiled, poised, polished. My husband squeezed my hand at the table, whispering, "You've outdone yourself again." I believed him. Then, the MC paused. "Before we present the award, we have a special guest, someone who has been part of this award's legacy from the beginning. Please welcome Mr. Marcus Vasquez." My heart stilled. My father. Here. I watched him walk to the stage in his old suit, the one he wore at my medical school graduation. The fabric was faded, but his posture was straight, his gaze steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm, but carrying across the room, "I am proud to be here tonight. I am Elena's father. For years, I've watched her achievements with pride. But there's a part of this story that has never been told." The room grew tense. I felt my chest tighten. "My daughter is brilliant," he continued, "but the Pediatric Neurosurgery Excellence Award was made possible by donations I made anonymously, through a trust. I never wanted credit. I only wanted her to have every opportunity." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mind spun. I wanted to stop him, to tell him this wasn't the place, but it was too late. He pulled out documents, projected statements, proof of every payment he had made. It felt like time stopped. The applause that followed wasn't for me anymore, it was for him. I saw admiration in faces that once looked up to me. I also saw pity. When the speech ended, I couldn't breathe. The board members whispered among themselves, the ethics committee convened, and within an hour, I was informed that the award's associated research grant, worth $8 million, was being withdrawn pending investigation. $8 million gone. My reputation shaken, but none of that compared to the ache in my heart. For the first time in years, I saw my father not as an embarrassment, but as a man who had loved me beyond reason, and for the first time, I realized how much I had taken that love for granted. After the gala, I locked myself in the hospital's private lounge, the echo of applause still ringing in my ears. The golden chandeliers that once symbolized triumph now felt harsh and cruel. I had walked into that ballroom expecting celebration. I walked out feeling exposed. My father entered quietly a few minutes later. I didn't even hear the door open, only the soft shuffle of his worn shoes. I spun around, anger masking the confusion twisting in my chest. "How could you do that to me?" I demanded. "You humiliated me in front of my colleagues, my mentors, everyone." He didn't flinch. His voice was calm, almost tired. "Elena, I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because the truth matters. I couldn't keep watching you forget where you came from." "Forget?" I snapped. "I worked for everything I have." He shook his head slowly. "You worked hard, yes. But I gave you the chance to begin. The store, my savings, my future, everything I had was for you. And still, you acted like I was a burden you had to hide." His words landed like blows I didn't want to admit I deserved. Images flashed through my mind, him closing the market for the last time, his hands trembling as he hung the for sale sign. Me, waving goodbye, too eager to leave that small life behind. I turned away, unable to meet his eyes. "You could have told me about the donations. You could have spared me this embarrassment." "I didn't want recognition," he replied. "But when you told me I was an embarrassment to you, that was the moment I realized silence had cost us more than money ever could. My anger drained, replaced by a heavy shame. All the years I had spent building a name, polishing an image, striving for respect. I had forgotten the man who gave up everything to make that possible. The next morning, the consequences arrived swiftly. My phone buzzed non-stop, calls from journalists, administrators, and former partners. Headlines screamed my name, award-winning surgeons' accolades funded by father's donations. By noon, the $8 million research grant was officially revoked. Invitations to conferences were withdrawn. Sponsors stepped away. Even some colleagues avoided eye contact in the hallways. For the first time in my career, the hospital felt cold. I walked through the same corridors, but instead of admiration, I felt whispers trail behind me. The fall from grace was silent, but sharp. At home, my husband avoided confrontation. Elena, he said one night, loosening his tie, this situation could hurt both of us. Maybe lay low for a while. No interviews. No social media. I nodded, though deep down I knew what he meant. He was protecting his reputation, not me. Within weeks, he moved into a hotel temporarily. He never came back. Alone in the mansion, I wandered from room to room. Every corner seemed hollow, the marble floors, the glass staircase, the designer furniture. None of it felt earned anymore. Late one night, I found an old box buried in my closet. Inside were pictures of the store, me at age 10, perched on the counter, my father behind the register with his tired smile. Beneath the photos lay a note I'd written to him during medical school. One day I'll make you proud, Dad. I cried for hours. A week later, I called him. My voice shook. Dad, can we talk? We met at a small diner near his apartment, the kind with cracked leather booths and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. He arrived early, of course. He always did. When he saw me, he smiled softly, like nothing had happened. I sat across from him, unsure where to start. I'm sorry, I whispered. He took a sip of his coffee and waited. I was selfish, I continued. I thought success meant outgrowing you, outgrowing the life we had. But without you, there wouldn't be any Dr. Vasquez. I didn't just forget what you did, I forgot who you are. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached across the table, his hand rough and warm over mine. Mija, he said, I never wanted an apology. I only wanted you to remember that love doesn't disappear when you achieve more. I gave because I believed in you. But love deserves respect, not shame. Tears blurred my vision. I know that now. I want to make it right. And I did. Over the following months, I rebuilt my life, not the image, but the foundation. I returned the money my father had used for my tuition, setting up a scholarship in his name for underprivileged medical students. I wrote openly about what happened, sharing my story not as a scandal, but as a lesson. Slowly, the hospital community began to see me differently, not as the woman with revoked grants, but as someone who learned humility. Patients returned, colleagues reached out, and my father became a familiar face in the pediatric wing. The first time I introduced him to a group of interns, I said proudly, "This is my father, the man who made me who I am." He smiled with tears in his eyes. "No, Mija," he said. "You made yourself. I just held the door open." My reputation didn't recover overnight, but something more important did, my sense of purpose. I started working with families who struggled to afford medical care, creating programs that offered free consultations and surgeries. For every child I helped, I felt a piece of redemption take root. On my next birthday, I didn't celebrate in a ballroom or luxury resort. I spent the evening in my father's small apartment. There was a simple cake, a few balloons, and laughter that filled the room more richly than any applause ever had. When it was time to blow out the candles, my father said, "Make a wish." I looked at him, at the man who had given me everything, and smiled. "No need," I said. It already came true. As the years passed, the scandal faded into memory, but the lesson remained etched in my heart. Success built on pride is fragile. Gratitude, on the other hand, is unbreakable. I learned that love doesn't need grand gestures or public recognition, it needs presence, respect, and humility. My father's sacrifices had once been hidden, but now, they shone brighter than any award I could ever win. In the end, I realized the truth: real success isn't measured by wealth, titles, or applause, it's measured by the hearts we honor along the way.